Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this discussion. We're excited to get underway. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and so I will try not to take up too much of our time getting to them. My name is Patrick Sims. I'm Director of Policy and Research with the Hunt Institute, and we are very much looking forward to hearing from everyone today and to hearing your questions and comments throughout. You'll see the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. While you will be muted throughout the entirety of the meeting, given how many people we have on the line, please do ask your questions, or if you have any relevant comments you'd like to make sure you share, put them into the Q&A, and we will get to as many of them as we can during the discussion. Finally, and I would also request if you could add your name and title and organization, and we will try to make sure that we get to you as soon as we can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Javed Siddiqui, the President and CEO of the Hunt Institute, to provide some opening remarks, and then we will hear from the rest of our great panelists. Over to you, Javed.
Thanks, Patrick, and welcome to everybody to our first webinar in this new series, Strategies for Rural Post-Secondary Attainment. I'd particularly like to thank Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who's been a fearless leader in this work and who cares deeply about educational outcomes for the students of Illinois. Also like to thank Deputy Governor Jesse Ruiz, who has been a great partner in making this series possible and who works tirelessly for Illinois daily. With the U.S. grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, previously existing inequities have been exacerbated more than ever. For rural students, divides that exist due to technological inequities, intergenerational poverty, lack of access to enrichment opportunities, and low funding have created barriers that prevent them from accessing post-secondary opportunities at the same rate as their urban and suburban peers. So as the conversations in higher education continue to focus on questions of equity, institutions are wrestling with these access barriers for rural students. This is the first webinar in our strategies for rural post-secondary attainment here in Illinois. Subsequent webinars will focus on the rural digital divide for higher education students and how communities and higher education institutions can partner to support student success. I sincerely hope that you will be able to join us for all three webinars and will stay engaged and work with us to find tangible solutions for increasing access for Illinois' rural students. I'd now like to introduce the catalyst of the series, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. I came to know Lieutenant Governor through the Hunt Institute's Hunt Cain Leadership Fellows Program, which works with state leaders to equip them with resources to lead on education in their states and in their roles. Since getting to know her, she has been engaged, passionate, and active partner in this work, and we're so grateful for her knowledge and her leadership. With that, Lieutenant Governor, I'll turn it over to you to offer some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Javed, and thank you for that introduction, and also thank you for your inspiring leadership at the Hunt Institute. I want to commend the Hunt Institute staff for organizing this webinar and for all the work that you do to uplift our students and educators and policymakers all throughout the country, as well as for the policy dialogue that takes place as it relates to education and our students. I also want to thank Governor Pritzker for his steadfast leadership in our efforts to increase resources to make education more equitable here in Illinois. To Deputy Governor Ruiz, thank you for your participation, and to your staff and their great work on today's event. I also want to acknowledge all of the other dignitaries and webinar panelists who are joining us. It is an honor to share this space with you, and it's an to share this opportunity with you. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you for making room in your busy schedules in order to be here today. This is indeed a unique and challenging time for everyone, but especially our students. And I applaud your passion for education and your remarkable dedication to our students. I see the significant challenges that our rural schools face, especially as the chair of the Governor's Rural Affairs Council. We are constantly thinking of ways to create pathways for our rural students to post-secondary education, and we know that this is critical. Our council is dedicated to collaborating with educators, community leaders, and local districts to beat those challenges. One of the ways that we try to do that is by empowering our council committee on education and workforce development to take steps that prioritize post-secondary education. Now, this includes making sure that education doesn't end at high school for young men and women in rural areas, especially as I think about young women. And by the way, I also chair the Illinois Council on Women and Girls. So this is one of the particular focuses that we have for our rural communities. This webinar series aligns directly with that goal and so much more. Now, in the state of Illinois, our rural counties have significantly higher rates of associate degree attainment, but lower rates of bachelor's degree attainment. And this leads to lower economic success for individuals without a bachelor's degree. Students from households where the income is below average are likely to earn less from from a college degree, regardless of where they live. But here's a fact that is at the core of the challenges when it comes to elevating communities and education in our rural communities. Rural students in low-income households are much less likely to file for FAFSA to receive state aid that would help them pay for college. And that is leaving money and opportunity on the table. And we must change this narrative. The rural communities in Illinois are filled with plentiful resources that are often hard to find. And there are meaningful community support systems and close-knit relationships that work diligently to support all of our students. With this in mind, we've partnered with the Hunt Institute to create this webinar series, Strategies for Rural Post-Secondary Attainment in Illinois. On July 27th, from 10:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central Time, our webinar will brainstorm ideas on how we can close the rural digital divide. And then on August 6th, at the same time, we will discuss ways that community partnerships can strengthen post-secondary attainment. Over the course of these 3 webinars, we hope to give you space to discuss state-level strategies for ensuring that all stakeholders are working together to develop pathways to post-secondary achievement for our rural students. We look forward to creating meaningful solutions for the rural students of Illinois that will help them develop their skills and civic leadership to make for a better world. I am now going to hand it over to Deputy Governor Jesse Ruiz. Thank you.
Remember to unmute. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you all from the Hunt Institute for hosting us and for your time and effort in bringing us all together today and in this series on the 27th and the 6th. Rural post-secondary attainment is critical to helping Illinois achieve its post-secondary attainment goal of having 60% of Illinois' adults obtain a high-quality degree or credential by the year 2025. While rural students are more likely to attend community college and complete an associate degree as compared to urban students, they are less likely to transfer their associate degree to a 4-year program. As cost is a main obstacle to post-secondary achievement for rural students, transferring a community college degree to a 4-year program is a cost-effective option for obtaining a bachelor's degree, which is increasingly crucial for success in the workforce. Illinois data demonstrates the importance of programs like the University of Chicago's Emerging Rural Leaders Program, which brings high schoolers from across the state to campus for college and career coaching and to expose them to what a major university can offer. You'll hear today from a student from this very program who will discuss the impact that this program has had on their post-secondary trajectory. And of course, on the balance of their life, I would posit. Colleges in Illinois are also increasing the presence of their staff and faculty in high schools across the state, as well as expanding dual enrollment options to address the lack of college-level coursework in rural areas. This shows the importance of collaboration between policymakers, institutions of higher education, and local schools to ensure that rural students get the information and support needed to apply to college. There's also incredible work happening throughout Illinois relating to rural post-secondary attainment. Not only am I thrilled to see that the hard work highlighted throughout this series, but I'm also hopeful that these discussions will foster conversations that will drive us to continuously improve access, persistence, and completion for rural post-secondary students. Thank you again for taking the time to be here, and I'm excited to hear of many of the innovative and thoughtful solutions that will rise from these discussions. And just a final thought that of course, throughout this pandemic, I'm constantly seeking silver linings. And as we are getting ready to issue new remote learning guidance from the State Board of Education for all 852 school districts, there is something that we've learned, that learning can happen not just in brick or mortar schools, but obviously getting better at doing remote learning. And so I'm looking forward to connecting all of our districts further. We also have an Illinois Math and Science Academy that is a premier high school in the state for science and math students, and looking to be able to export their unique skills and knowledge base to every student, especially to rural students who may not have access. And of course, we've got to work on broadband access for those students, and CARES Act funds and GEAR funds are helping to do that. We frankly need a lot more. So I'm looking forward to what Congress does in the next few weeks. But there are some silver linings to all of this that has created some new capacity and new innovative ways to do teaching and learning, regardless of geography. So thank you all. Look forward to discussing these further.
Thank you so much, Deputy Governor Ruiz and Lieutenant Governor Stratton, for those remarks to help frame both our overall work that we're looking to do over this series, as well as today's discussion. Quickly, I'm going to try to just get us into our first panel. Before I do just want to quickly remind you that please submit questions via the Q&A throughout, and we will make sure we get to as many as we can. But first, I'm really pleased to introduce Stephanie Banchero, the Education Program Director at the Joyce Foundation, who is going to lead our first discussion. I will turn over to her to introduce our resource experts and lead the conversation. Stephanie?
Well, thank you, Patrick. I am very happy to be part of this panel, and I always love following the Deputy Governor because he always has such a positive outlook and is always looking for the silver lining, so I appreciate that. I just want to say before I make some introductions that I have long been a fan of the Hunt Institute and the great work that you guys do in North Carolina specifically, but nationally, so really happy to be part of this. And then of course I am a huge fan of the Partnership for College Completion. Joyce has long been a supporter of their work and of Kyle, so we're really lucky to have these two panelists. So let me just jump right in. I'll introduce them. So we have Jeff Carlson. He leads strategy and rural engagement at the College Board. He has experience in both K-12 and higher ed, and he leads the College Board's efforts to develop and expand access to the College Board programs and increase success for students in small towns and rural areas. He was raised by educators in Council, Idaho, a town I had never heard of, has 865 people in it. So I think we can agree that he has a personal understanding of the opportunities and challenges in rural education. In his previous life, he taught elementary special ed, I think it was, in the South Bronx. So I love the fact that we have educators on the panel here. Our second speaker will be Kyle Westbrook. He is the founding executive director for the Partnership for College Completion. For those of you who don't know them, and probably a lot of you do, but they're a nonprofit based in Chicago, and they champion policies and practices to ensure that all students in and around the Chicago area, but they're especially focused on low-income students and first-generation students, making sure that they graduate from college and achieve their career aspirations. Before Kyle started the partnership, he was the executive director for education policy in Mayor Rahm Emanuel's office. I imagine there would be a book in that experience, but I promise not to ask about that. And then Kyle also was a teacher before he took on these multiple roles, and he worked in Chicago Public Schools in the Office of Magnet Gifted and IB programs. One thing I'll say before I turn it over is, for those of you who haven't read, Kyle, the partnership issued a report, I think it was this year or last year, called Priced Out Rural Students. It's a fascinating read, and it really takes a deep dive into what rural students are facing and some policies that could potentially help here. As we've said already, they're going to speak about 3 to 5 minutes, make some opening statements. I'll ask a few questions, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'll monitor those chat and ask the panelists the questions. We'll spend most of the time with the audience asking questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Stephanie. First, just wanted to say thanks to the Hunt Institute, Deputy Governor Ruiz, and Lieutenant Governor Stratton for having me. As a graduate of Council High School in central Idaho, in a town that was named because it was a gathering location for Idaho's indigenous population, and as Stephanie said, because I'm the son of career K-12 educators, it's exciting to join this conversation about rural students. It's also fun to discuss a fellow letter I state, as we Idahoans are used to describing how far away we are geographically from Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois. But it's also an honor to discuss this work with Dr. Westbrook, who I've admired from afar as he's worked within Chicago Public Schools and across Illinois to improve outcomes for underrepresented students. Here at the College Board, our mission is to clear a path for students to own their future. It's our whole reason for existing as a nonprofit. And while our tools are designed to keep students on track, that work has had to change as schools have changed and closed. So for the time of coronavirus, we're approaching our work with 3 things in mind, and these will have particular importance for rural students. First, students are going to need reliable broadband internet and access to devices that allow for continued learning. So we're looking to connect students who use our programs, AP and the SAT suite, to organizations and companies seeking to close the digital divide. They're also going to need high quality coursework that's available anywhere, which is why we've announced AP Daily, which is short videos that teachers can assign through our AP Classroom platform to reinforce content for students. And finally, years of research on college-going behavior shows us that students often need bite-sized, concrete information about the process, not overflowing packets and forms. So we want to provide simple, concrete steps that students can take right now to stay on track to enroll in college, which is why our College Board Opportunity Scholarships program guides students through 6 research-backed steps on the path to college admission, including FAFSA completion. So while rural students have a tougher time accessing high-speed internet and sometimes the devices they need to learn, COVID-19 actually seems to perhaps allow for rural environments to have a little more normalcy than their densely populated peers. So far, we're seeing rural schools state their intentions to be at least partially, if not fully, open this fall, while urban and suburban students, particularly those packed high schools, will start virtually. And that can matter for juniors and seniors looking at college options right now. But what should students in small towns know about the College Board programs, particularly if you're a junior or senior? You can still register to take an SAT in test centers that can remain open if it's safe to do so. We're working with schools and states across the country, including in the state of Illinois, to take the steps we can to make the SAT school day, where students take the SAT in their home high school at no cost to the student, available this fall along with the PSAT. Those students with AP teachers will have additional tools such as AP Daily to make AP happen, whether teachers and students are linked together in school buildings or at home. And our Opportunity Scholarships program is available to rising juniors and seniors and is explicitly designed to help kids stay on the path to enroll in a strong fit institution with an aid package that makes college a smart investment. Looking forward to talking about those and other things that you all may want to talk about, but that's what we're thinking about from the College Board's perspective.
Oops. Thank you, Jeff. My name is Kyle Westbrook, the Executive Director for the Partnership for College Completion. And again, thank you to the Hunt Institute. Thank you to Lieutenant Governor Stratton, Deputy Governor Ruiz for your ongoing leadership on all educational matters in the state, and really the unique opportunity that the current administration has offered to really dive deep on access issues, the things that are important for our students across the state. And so I'll just give you a little bit of background about the Partnership for College Completion, what it is that we do, and why issues of rural access are of particular concern for us. So we are a nonprofit based here in Chicago that works to really close the equity gap in degree completion, particularly for low-income students, students of color, first-generation students, because what we've seen in Illinois, which is consistent with what is happening across the country, is that we've seen increasing high school graduation rates. We've seen increased levels of high school, college preparation rates for students as measured by all kinds of metrics. We've seen increased college going rates for many populations across the country and in the state of Illinois. But what we haven't seen is increased completion rates, particularly for equity populations, low-income students, students of color, first-generation students. And so our organization exists to really work with university leaders to help close those gaps in degree completion, work with policymakers to look at what are the ways that the state of Illinois can create the right conditions for student success, as well as work with members of the general public to raise awareness about the issues of concern for low-income students and students of color. The issue of rural students, so we're based in Chicago, but the issue of rural student success is one, frankly, that we feel cuts across geography, because when we look at the issues that rural students are facing, some of them are very similar to issues that students in urban settings are facing, and then some are very unique. And we see the opportunities to increase access for all of our students as one that cuts across geography, and one that is frankly quite personal to me, as I grew up in Southern Illinois and have deep family roots in Southern Illinois, and many of my cousins, aunts, and uncles have attended community colleges in Southern Illinois, whether it be Kaskaskia Community College, Southeast Illinois College, John A. Logan Community College. So these issues are of deep personal concern to me as well, because when I look at the trajectory of my cousins and nephews, nieces who are entering or about to enter college, having a pathway to college, not just for their associate's degree, but also for their four-year degree, is the kind of opportunity for the opportunity to share some of those findings and sort of share some of the opportunities that we as a state can get better.
So thank you, Jeff and Kyle, for getting us started. I want to remind the audience to feel free to drop some questions into the Q&A box there. I want to start by asking maybe a ground setting question, or set the ground a little bit. When the Lieutenant Governor was talking, I hope I took good notes here, she named a couple of things that were of particular importance. If Lieutenant Governor wants to come on, feel free.
Yeah, so I'll dive in and talk a little bit about the narrative. I think, you know, when we were doing the report, Rural Students Report, we spent a lot of time, so it's not only a report that is qualitative and has some deep data, but it's also a report that draws on some of the experiences of rural students. And we thought it was important to capture the experiences, the qualitative experiences of the students themselves, to begin to frame the narrative that what we see and what we've heard from students is students who really desperately want a path towards a degree. And the narrative of rural communities who you know, there's this sort of really, I would argue, negative and really argue counterproductive narrative that rural communities, you know, are sort of self-isolating and sort of inward looking. And what we heard from our students is an increasing focus on, hey, look, we want to get our associate's degree and our bachelor's degree, but we actually can't see the path to getting it, and the path to getting it in a way that is affordable for our students and for our communities. And one of the things that came out of our report that we saw over and heard over and over again was this notion that when rural students are able to first complete their associates, and then in some cases transfer to a four-year university, or if they are able to go directly to a four-year university, one of the limiting factors is the degree to which, and this is true of many students in Illinois, but the way in which rural students take on an incredible amount of debt. And then unfortunately, in many cases, there's not the job opportunities back in their home communities that allow them then to go home. We heard, and part of the narrative also that you hear is that rural students, can't wait to get out of rural communities. And we heard quite the contrary, that rural students want to go away to college, they want to get a degree, but they actually want to come home. They want to come back many of them want to come back to their communities, but when they're saddled with tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt, it makes it very difficult for them to come back home and get a job that's going to allow them to earn enough money to actually pay that debt down. So I thought it was a powerful part of the narrative that we heard, which is that students want to come back to their communities and want to come back to living close to home and in the community that they've grown up in. But unfortunately, the high cost of college often prevents them from doing it.
That's great. I'll just add a couple more things. I think one additional issue that people can be quick to blame colleges about that I want to talk a little bit about is that rural students aren't recruited as heavily, nor do they visit campuses at the same rates as their suburban and urban peers. And a lot of times people jump all over admissions officers for that. But I was reading a Hechinger Report article, an education professor at Appalachian State in North Carolina said that when you think about an urban high school, a college recruiter can hit 1,500 students at a time. And to do that in a rural area, you've got to go to 10 high schools in 10 different towns and hope that there's not a bunch of different activities that are going to be drawing kids away. And so I think we have to figure that out. That's a reality. That's, it's economies of scale that actually many people in rural communities have chosen to kind of have that. But part of it is because colleges haven't historically gotten information about rural students in the same way. So if you attend a private high school, you may be able to send in a 10-page packet about all the information that your school does when you apply to that. And rural schools may have one counselor that's also the volleyball coach and may drive a school bus like mine did. And so we've partnered with states, including Illinois and my home state of Idaho, to provide all kids the opportunity to take the PSAT and the SAT, particularly the PSAT, which gives every student the opportunity to have additional information that can be shared with colleges and universities. I think we also need to get better at the stories we tell about rural students. I'm an example of a story that gets told about me that actually is part of the problem. So I was born in the middle of nowhere, as I am many times described, and I sometimes describe myself. And I was, granted this magical opportunity to attend Georgetown and then attend Harvard. And that's what we define as success for rural students in higher education many times. And while I was incredibly blessed with the educational opportunities I have, we have to get better at telling the story of my friends who attended the same high school, went to the local four-year institution, and then went back and started a small business in my hometown, who go back and figure out how to make their hometown better and recover when the mill left my hometown in 8th grade. And so I think we've tried to do that here better at the College Board. I think people like to tell the stories of a rural or an urban AP student who gets that chance to do AP art history and then is plucked away to Manhattan to study at NYU, and that's so great, and they never go back. And isn't that an awesome opportunity? And we need to do better, and we're trying to do our part in that, to say it's not just about being plucked out and never returning. It's about getting that education so you can actually make life better for you and those around you in the hometown that gave you so much. And so I think, when you see a brochure that's all just about the campus and not what students do after that, I think that's part of the thing we're instilling in those rural students, that if you come here, it's going to be hard for you to go back.
Super interesting. I want to remind the audience, you guys please feel free to pop questions into the Q&A. Happy to ask our panelists. So there's of course many issues we can talk about. One is the enrollment, and then one is the persistence or graduation. So let's stick with the enrollment part of things. I'm just wondering, Jeff or Kyle, what are policies or practices that that you would either suggest or that you've seen that have been successful in boosting application rates for rural students? I mean, do we know what works? And if you could talk about either research or policies and practices that you've seen out there.
Yeah, I think the Lieutenant Governor Stratton hit on one of the key levers that exist in the state of Illinois. Illinois as a state does better than most states in terms of FAFSA completion, but that FAFSA completion it's uneven across the state. We see some districts in the state that where 80% or upwards of 90% of the students are completing the FAFSA, and then we also see districts in the state where only 20% of the students in that district will have completed the FAFSA. And those districts with the lowest numbers tend to be our rural areas and our rural communities for many of the same reasons that, you know, Jeff just laid out. When you have a high school guidance counselor who is stretched thin and is performing so many other tasks because of the nature of the resource limitations in those districts, we just don't see those FAFSA completions. And I really was pleased to see the legislation that the Governor Pritzker signed, I think it was about a year ago, that mandated that as a state, we, you know, get to 100% FAFSA completion across the state. And I think that legislation, frankly, will be one of the biggest levers for increasing application and access, because what we also know is students get scared away by sticker price. And if there's one thing that I could undo that's happened in the last 20 years, it's been the arms race of sticker price for colleges, universities, particularly four-year institutions, whereby a student sees a price, you know, a $30,000 a year tuition price tag for a university, and they almost, so many of our students will say, I can't afford $30,000. I'm not even going to apply to that place. When we know, of course, sticker price it's, you know, I wouldn't say it's a meaningless indicator, but it just doesn't mean quite as much, particularly at, you know, private universities. And you know, filling that FAFSA out will be the first step that students take in understanding a financial picture for themselves and their families that frankly isn't as, in many cases, isn't as dire as it might look in relationship to that sticker price. And so just on a policy level, I think what the, you know, the Deputy Governor, Lieutenant Governor Stratton and Governor Pritzker have done to push FAFSA completion will have a tremendous impact. The other thing I'll point to is an increased increased opportunities through dual credit. It is one of the most cost-effective access issues that we as collectively in the state can really grasp and sort of get behind, which is getting more and more high school students taking those college level courses, and in many cases having success, right? And seeing that, wait a minute, I can do college work and I'm ready to do it now. As a high school senior, it really smooths that application, and it helps that student who may not otherwise have seen themselves in college, it helps them see themselves in college. And so the degree to which our rural community colleges in Illinois, it was just, we were, again, talking with the folks at Kaskaskia Community College and the work that they're doing with Vandalia, the work that they're doing with Centralia to really build those kinds of high school to college pathways is, to me, one of the greatest sort of changes that's happened in the last 10 years, and really innovations that will increase that pipeline to college for students.
Kyle, I just wanted to mention, it was last June. It was on a Sunday. Session was supposed to end on Friday. We went into overtime, and so we needed an elevated vote. Passed by one vote. Believe it or not, there was a lot of opposition to making FAFSA a graduation requirement. But that goes into effect this coming academic year. And of course, because of the pandemic, folks have asked for postponement or a waiver, and the answer is no. It's happening.
Good, good.
That's great. And for any student that's that's joined our Opportunity Scholarship Program and completes the FAFSA, we've got kind of micro scholarships available for students. So you have a chance to win a scholarship that you can put toward your college financial aid. I think that's super smart, Dr. Westbrook, about sticker price. I think my parents both went to college to become teachers, but had no idea what the difference between sticker price and what actual price afterward would be. And I think you get to that many times so late in the admissions process or thinking about school, it can turn a lot of rural students off. I think a couple of things, Stephanie, that I would mention. The first thing would be to define rural. Specifically for admissions officers to try to have a definition. It's a complicated process. You may have to be okay with varying definitions, but it'd be great to have that definition across the state so you could see over time whether you're making progress there. When you move from applications to admissions decision-making purposes, our landscape tool allows admissions practitioners to see the locale of a student. So we draw that from NCES school level data. So whether it's kind of town, rural, suburban, or urban. And that only comes in after you're starting to make decisions, but it lets you know kind of the context about where that student came from. And I think we're also going to include this year a field on internet access and availability in an applicant's neighborhood. So that'll be not just for rural students, but also urban students who may have less access just because their building may not have the right kind of high-speed internet. So admissions officers will know whether a student had the kind of internet access that we may need to be able to fill out the FAFSA. But I also think that institutions can signal this through things like what we've already talked about. The Emerging Rural Leaders Program at University of Chicago is one of the best examples nationally. While it's not just a gimmick to boost applications, right? You can do a lot of things that say, hey, click here, here's a button, and you can get that number high. But if you don't actually make some changes on your campus to welcome those students once they get there, you've got to mold the institution to value the presence of rural students in a different way. And it reminds me a lot of the work the Posse Foundation has done. It's a model that my former institution, Franklin and Marshall back in Pennsylvania, has used to diversify and strengthen their student body. And I think programs specifically talking about, what does it look like to come to this campus from a small town? What does it look like to go back from this campus and be able to talk to students who've gone through that experience? And you'll hear more from a student who's gone through that at University of Chicago. But I think, I wish I would have had that when I was on Georgetown's campus. I think state institutions may not think that it's just as necessary, but I think it would be a great thing for state institutions to think about as well.
Thank you. And then the FAFSA thing is like, I saw the thumbs up. So I love that too. I mean, I'm going to put this question aside because I want to stick with this topic, but I do wonder and worry a little bit about how COVID potentially could affect FAFSA completion come next year. Who knows what sort of environment kids are going to be in, but I'll put that question aside for right now. There's a question from the audience. What impact will the newer limitations on privacy and sharing of search data have on the ability of schools to find and recruit rural and low-income students?
I can go ahead and take that question. That's from Eric, who's one of our trustees here at the College Board. I think there's a couple things I would say. One is our goal is to provide as much information as possible, but that information should be in the control of students and their families. And so, we want to make sure that any information that's shared about a student is with their permission, and we need to figure that out. I think policymakers may be a little bit behind where technology has gotten. This is not the only case where policy sometimes has a hard time following technology, but we need to figure out when is student data being used for purposes that are helping them understand the difference between sticker price and what they actually may need to pay. When is it helping them figure out that the only option is not the first option that they've heard of, but there may be more? When is it being used? Dr. Westbrook's, the Priced Out report talks about how rural students attend for-profit institutions, maybe because they have seen a commercial on TV, as I many times did. Those institutions have funding that gives them big ad campaigns. And so we have to figure out how to, from an equity lens, how do we make sure that student data privacy is addressed, but also isn't used to completely box students out of information they may be able to see. COVID hurts that. We've seen FAFSA completion rates plummet across the country. FAFSA completion parties happen at a lot of schools, and that can't happen if your school is closed down. And I think, I'm looking forward to see whether we can see federal legislation. Always a fingers crossed thing when you say that, but there is a lot of movement on both sides of the aisle to do some FAFSA simplification. It's something that makes sense. If COVID is a way that we can say, look, we've already all known this, let's take a step forward, I think that would be great too. But, I do, for rural students, understanding the cost of things makes a big difference, just because we're used to driving hours just to get groceries, and that's a bigger opportunity cost than a lot of folks may have. And so figuring that out and making that simple for folks is super smart, and love what Illinois has done on FAFSA completion. Wish we could make it easier for everybody so that having it as a requirement doesn't seem as big of a lift as it may.
Jeff, I just actually want to build on what you just mentioned in terms of, driving and geography, because one of the things that, our report really highlighted was the degree to which rural students travel, significantly farther to get to college. And the fact that the median Illinois student from a rural area travels about 40% farther to get to college, and over about 100 miles to get to a private college, compared to about 30 miles for students living in urban and suburban areas, really points to an access issue when it comes to four-year universities for our students in rural communities. And since I have Deputy Governor and Lieutenant Governor Stratton on this line, I will put in a plug that I think one of the most innovative things that we've seen, certainly in this area, has been the University Center up in Lake County, which is a dedicated campus where really four-year universities from across the state, and some of them from even out of the state, they have really dedicated space to be able to deliver courses to students in Lake County. So Eastern Illinois, Southern Illinois, Western Illinois State, U of I, all of them have a presence at the University Center. And in that way, it makes four-year universities that are pretty distant much more accessible to students in Lake County. And since I have both of you online, I have to put in a plug that we need a university center in Southern Illinois. Where, and frankly, the need is even greater, where there's even less opportunity for students to have access to those four-year institutions. But, given is, that kind of institution, that kind of venue where those institutions can partner with University Center to offer courses and allow students to complete their four-year degree without having to move away, hundreds of miles, or B, simply have to forego the prospect of a four-year degree, or C, even worse, enroll in predatory universities that are going to take their money and often leave them with a degree that doesn't offer them any kind of real hope and prospect for entering the middle class. Smart investment, frankly, for the state would be sort of a University Center South that would, again, create greater access for rural students to four-year institutions that may otherwise be inaccessible to them.
Well, after badgering the audience to put in questions, now the chat box is filled with questions, most of which we're not going to have time to get to. So I'm going to try something, which is I'm going to ask two of them at the same time that are not necessarily connected, and maybe each of you can pick one of them to answer. So the first one is, Illinois suffers from large outmigration of students to four-year schools out of state. This has been a big story in the news for a long time, that we're losing a bunch of kids. What are some strategies being considered to keep our students in state and keep them there? That's the first question. That might even be a question for the Deputy Governor. The second question, I think, is a quick, easier one to answer, which is, with respect to sticker price, does Illinois truth and tuition law contribute to the sticker shock that discourages rural students from pursuing college?
So I'll talk about the first question about the outmigration, because I do think, frankly, from our perspective, given that we're concerned with low-income students, first-generation students, frankly, this to us has been a story that's been overcovered, because when we see Illinois has always been a state that outmigrates more students than it in-migrates. But that certainly took a sharp turn in 2015, 2016, when the state didn't have a budget and students, frankly, didn't have confidence that their four-year universities would be able to support them. But what we see when you look at the data is the outmigration is more often than not, they are higher income students, middle income students who are leaving the state. We are actually way more concerned about the students who are staying in the state and who are choosing to stay in Illinois and are choosing to remain in their local communities, and how can we build a path for those students who are choosing to stay in Illinois. And these are overwhelmingly low-income students, overwhelmingly first-generation students, overwhelmingly rural students who are staying in our state. And how do we create a path towards an viable degree for them? I think the legislature and the governor, they've done a lot in terms of providing funds through the AIM High program, where four-year universities have some discretion to award merit-based aid to students to keep them in state. And at least this year, in their first year, we saw some early indicators that that program was having some success in increasing enrollment in our state public universities. And so I think that there's been a lot that investment has been a tremendous investment, and one, frankly, that the universities are really proud of and really using as another tool, another financial tool to recruit and retain students in Illinois.
And just quickly, I'll address the other one, just to make sure we get an answer to it. On truth and tuition, I guess from a policy perspective, I think more information is better. So I don't necessarily know that you try to restrict information there, but I do think, being able to have net price calculators available to people, being able to look at that information at the same time. There is a difference between, most people know that when you go to buy a car, that if you pay the sticker price, you actually probably haven't done your job. And we as a society have somehow adopted that as practice that most of us know. And so if we could get college to be more like buying a car. In fact, you see a lot of rural kids who take scholarship money and go put a down payment on a truck. That was a common occurrence in my hometown because he actually didn't have to take the check into the school. But if we could have college look more like the information that people know about buying a car, there's federal interventions that have been attempted at this, but I think state level interventions to help students, early on, and to help parents, candidly, who are making that decision for students in many cases. So to make sure that it's not just in students' hands or high school counselors, but also directly to parents.
Patrick, I think we're at time. I'm happy to keep going, but if you want me to stop, I will stop.
I think we can give you another 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So there's a couple questions here that that are sort of similar in sort of helping high school students figure things out and helping them with advising. So I'm just going to read the question. Are there initiatives to support students in figuring out their future career goals and finding colleges that would support them in that goal? And then there's a question about, I think these sort of go together, what supports currently exist for college advising in rural communities, and how can we improve access to these services? I'll just say that everybody knows that college advising is a gigantic problem. There's not enough college advising going on. So if you guys could take both of those questions.
So I can start on the advising side. So we've worked with a lot of advising organizations. The College Advising Corps is the one that we've worked with most closely. They have a particular focus on underrepresented students and have done a lot of work in many states in rural communities to bring college counseling to rural communities. A lot of times their counselors actually travel between rural schools over the course of a day or across days to bring additional college counseling support. I do think that this is an area where virtual tools can be a help. So with a couple different organizations, we just released a Fafsa Chatbot that actually helps a kid fill out the Fafsa. I remember when I filled it out, the most complicated question I had involved me calling up my biological father and asking for his salary information. I didn't talk to him all that often, but you got to fill that out in order to get all your Fafsa stuff in there. Same thing with our CSS profile. And it actually, the chatbot tells you, okay, you got to call up mom and dad. Do you have another mom and dad? Do you have any other caring adults that you need to do that? I never would have thought of that until I got to that point. And so being able to have somebody who's been programmed to tell you that, I think, so the rule may be use robots when you have to, use people when you can, and during COVID, we may be able to rely on some robots there. But there's also a bunch of groups that have tools on this. There's checklists, and I think getting information in front of folks, again, not so that they've got 70 different pieces of paper to sort through, but kind of here are 5 or 6 things, or here's the next thing you can do. There's a lot of virtual tools that have come out both before and because of COVID that I think can help on that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is just that, within the state, there are some really hyper local tools. The one I'm thinking of, the Illinois College to Career tool, which is a portal that really helps students sort of match potential areas of study with potential colleges and potential universities. And it's really a great tool. I know that ISAC has been really instrumental in helping to sort of stand that up. But it's a great tool for students who have some inkling of kind of what they want to do, but want to do a little bit of exploration. And to Jeff's point, this is a tool that it puts it right in the student's lap, and it's not one that the students have to sit in a counselor's office to kind of go through, but is an example of many of the kind of online tools that students can use for that kind of career exploration that frankly obviously didn't exist when I went to college, and it was just sitting, having to sit with a counselor for whatever 10-minute chunk of time he might have been able to carve out for me. And I think the degree to which our K-12 districts can help to curate those resources for students, and not only curate them, but make sure that students have reasonable access to them, and especially now given what's been happening with limited access to broadband, the degree to which our rural communities can find new and innovative ways to share digital hotspots and things like that will all help to bridge that divide and make sure that students have online access to these kinds of tools that can really help them in ways that our college counselors who are stretched so thin just aren't able to do with all the load that they have.
Well, I'm 9 minutes over my allotted time, so I think this is probably a good time to stop. I'm sorry for the questions that I did not get to in the chat box, but I want to thank Kyle and Jeff. Super interesting, very helpful, gave me a lot to think about, and also Deputy Governor Ruiz for jumping in and offering some always encouraging and thoughtful words. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again,
Thanks.
Thank you so much to Jeff and to Kyle for joining us and for that discussion. And thank you so much to Stephanie for leading it. Obviously, there was a lot more we could have talked about. We could have had 30 more minutes just with these great experts. So thank you. Luckily, this conversation, I think, will carry over into the next discussion really well, where we'll get to hear a little bit more from some practitioners who are on the ground doing some of this work. In particular, Dr. Matt Newland, Project Director for Rooted at College Advising Corps. We'll get to hear from a student, Adam Marchikaitis, from the Emerging Rural Leaders at University of Chicago, which we just heard a little bit about, and Dr. Clarence Wyatt, President at Moneth College. So I'm going to start first by coming to Dr. Newland. And Dr. Newland, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your work with College Advising Corps. We really appreciated Jeff giving us a little preview there about some of the great work that you all are doing. But if you could share a little bit more about the work at College Advising Corps and Rooted, what you're doing to increase post-secondary attainment for rural students, we would love to hear it.
Absolutely. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I just want to check, is my audio coming through okay?
Yes, you're good.
Fantastic. Thank you again for hosting this. Lieutenant Governor Stratton, thank you for promoting this and being such a strong advocate for serving rural students. So I want to start by laying a little bit of groundwork for the work we do at College Advising Corps. The mission of College Advising Corps is increasing post-secondary enrollment for low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented students. We do this through our partnerships with 31 higher education institutions in 17 states. In 2019, 2020, we had 829 near-peer advisors who served 240,000 students in 782 schools across the country. So we really are present, as Jeff alluded to earlier. We're really present across the country. Nearly 1/3 of the students that we serve are rural students. So they're attending rural or small town high schools in the majority of the state that we work in. Nearly 40% of the students that CAC serves are people of color, and over 75% of the rural students we serve are first generation, and a large number are low income students. And so we're really focused on reaching those students who most need the support, most need that additional guidance, resources, and just information. The College Advising Corps model focuses on 6 key performance indicators, which include meeting one-on-one with students, submitting the FAFSA, completing an admissions exam at least once. These KPIs we found through our research, our internal data, these KPIs are actually twice as predictive of college enrollment for rural students than they are for non-rural students. So for example, rural students who meet with an advisor are 16% more likely to enroll in college than their peers in that school who didn't meet with an advisor. Similarly, rural students who submitted a FAFSA are 21% more likely to enroll in college than their peers in that high school who didn't submit the FAFSA. So these KPIs that we focus on really do make a big difference, and which is why our work is so data-driven and so focused on our advisors getting that work done. Looking at the last few years of data, we've seen that 54% of our rural students served by CAC enroll in post-secondary education in comparison to 52% of non-rural students who are served by CAC. So what we're seeing is we're actually reversing the national trend, which often sees non-rural students enrolling in post-secondary education at a higher rate than rural students. So that's something I'm particularly proud of and excited about. However, as we have has been discussed earlier in this discussion, our rural students are more likely to enroll in a community college versus a 4-year institution. And then finally, I do want to talk about the amazing work we've done around persistence. Rural students who have been served by CAC have higher 1- and 2-year persistence rates than non-rural students who are served by CAC. So our students, they're enrolling full-time, they're persisting, which is something else, obviously everyone on this call is something we're very we think is very important, is very critical to the work we're doing. My work specifically is managing a pilot program here in Missouri. I'm based in St. Louis, a pilot program focused on increasing post-secondary enrollment for rural students at 6 high schools here in Missouri. We're doing this by partnering with our program, the Missouri College Advising Corps, and our partners at the Rooted Alliance. What we've done with these 6 high schools is increase the advisor training and support that's happening in the schools. We've created additional resources and guidance for the advisors and the students, and we've also had the opportunity to develop scholarship funding for the students. After year 1, we saw an increase in post-secondary enrollment for these 6 schools, and this current year, 2019-2020, we're actually seeing our students in these 6 high schools have higher FAFSA completion rates than the state and national completion rates. So that's something else we're very excited about as well. We are continuing to serve these students this summer as well through a summer melt texting campaign. So we are taking the students after they graduate, especially with everything that happened with COVID-19. We're continuing to support them through the summer with resources, online conversations with experts in the field, timelines, nudges, all of those different things to make sure that they get there in August and do enroll in college. And so it's taking a lot of what we've learned in the past, a lot of the research that we've seen working with rural students, and really putting it into action.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Adam, I'm going to come to you next. We'd love to hear a little bit more about the Emerging Rural Leaders Program and what it's been like for you to participate. And you could share a little bit about how it's impacted your post-secondary plans. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, I felt like that Emerging Rural Leaders Program was a wonderful experience that allowed me to be around intellectual individuals who shared similar goals with me. And it was also awesome to learn from professors and stuff from that sort of, from UChicago that had that collegiate sort of experience. And it was also nice to explore the community and neighborhood surrounding UChicago. because that's important to me, like who I'm going to be around whenever I go attend a university. And so as for impact on my plans, it made me realize what colleges were looking for in my application. And it also, in doing that, it eased my concerns with my application. So it made me see that I could make up for some lacking areas in my application with areas of strength and stuff. And it led me to see, like, from the school's perspective, how they were going to review the applications, like with holistic review and such. And yeah, it really did spark my curiosity early to start my college search. And unexpectedly, it made me realize that it's important to give back to my community once I've like achieved some degree of success in my life.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. We'll come back and hear a little bit more about that. Next, I want to come to President Wyatt. Thank you so much for joining us. We know that Monmouth College works hard to recruit and support rural students. Could you share a little bit more about how Monmouth does that?
I'll be glad to, Patrick. And first, let me say, Adam, we'd be glad to have you at Monmouth College. So just give my office a call anytime. I want to thank, like everyone else, thank Lieutenant Governor Stratton and Deputy Governor Ruiz for their leadership on all of these issues, and for the Hunt Institute for putting this series together. Those of you who don't know where Monmouth College is located, we're in Monmouth, Illinois, which is a town of about 9,000 people in west central Illinois. We're about 16 miles from the Mississippi River. If you drive 3.5, 4 hours due west from Chicago, you will get to us. And so we are a farming community. And we are a place that has traditionally served less advantaged students. We have been positioned in that area for a long time. Our faculty and staff loves to use the metaphor of the long runway, and that is the work that is very meaningful for us, and it's particularly important to me because we have talked a good bit about first generation college students today. I'm not only first generation college, I'm first generation high school. My parents' education stopped at the 8th grade, so this is a topic that's very important to me. There are a variety of things that I can point to, some examples of things that we do to touch on some of the things that have been talked about before. I think one of the most important things that we do is our partnership with the Rural Schools Collaborative, led by Gary Funk, which has operations all across the country. It is now headquartered here at Monmouth College. And one of the key things that we do through that partnership is to encourage and support our students in preparing for careers in teaching in small town and rural school systems. And the program is really geared toward preparing them to be community leaders and community assets. And so that is not only an incentive for students from small towns and rural areas to come and to prepare themselves to go back and serve in their communities or similar communities, but it's also a model of the importance that they can make, the important difference that they can make in the lives of those communities. And as I think Jeff said earlier, to change the story about rural students and what they can accomplish. Within the idea, one of the things that we do is we have a very strong emphasis on student success, on retention. About 3 years ago, I created what we call the retention moonshot, modeling off of the Apollo program, a sort of a whole of enterprise approach to recognize the fact that this is not just the purview of a few people on campus, but in fact, everybody contributes to this. And we have, and certainly first generation students are a key segment of those efforts. And so we've seen a great deal of success in those. Another way that I would point is a thing I would point out in terms of the things that we do at Monmouth are our direct involvement in our area schools. We have done this for the last several years, and this gets to the issue of the need for better counseling, better college counseling in our high schools. Our admission staff has gone into our area schools and provided college counseling. Now, certainly they tend to wear Monmouth College sweatshirts when they do that, but the it is a completely agnostic approach. We talk with them as any good college counselor would, and we provide that service to students in our area high schools. Another form of, a couple forms of direct involvement with our area high schools is the process of dual credit. We have done that for a long time and have made that very, very easy financially for students at our area high schools to do. We have also helped to supplement the curricula at some of our area high schools. We have traditionally had a very strong classics program at Monmouth College, and it is a vibrant and dynamic classics program that really positions itself well to help students develop skills and mindsets that are going to be very marketable. And that has rubbed off in our area high schools because of funding cuts. The town high school, not the county high school, was going to lose that position, and so we had senior students in the classics step in on an emergency basis and help provide that instruction and keep that very important program going. A last thing that I'll mention in a list of many things that I could share is transfer policies. This is both the right and the smart thing to do on the part of any four-year institution, and especially a private four-year institution. We have removed, and we still have some to remove, but we have removed almost every barrier in our curriculum to transfer from a two-year institution. We are in the process, now that we've done that, we're in the process of developing seamless partnerships with area community colleges, starting most particularly with Carl Sandburg, which is located in Galesburg, which is just a few miles from us. And our approach is to treat those students as if they were our students from the beginning, that we have our staff, our faculty, we have an advisor with them, helping them to think from the get-go about their career at Sandburg and moving seamlessly into a final 2 years to complete a degree at Monmouth College. So again, those are any number of things that I could point to, but those are some things that we've been working on most recently.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. And certainly we can see that you actively participate in the recruitment of rural students. So we appreciate that. And Adam, I think hopefully heard that message loud and clear. Dr. Newland, we're going to come back to you, and I'm just wondering from your experience, if you could share maybe one specific strategy or tactic that you've seen that helps recruit students into rural students into higher education. And thinking about the audience you have here, a number of state leaders on the call as well, what are some ways that strategy or another strategy could be scaled at a state level in a place like Illinois?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I appreciate it. I'm going to answer it and actually say two things based on what our advisors see in rural communities across the country. And I've worked with a lot of our rural advisors in many states, and no surprise to anyone on this call or anyone listening, but FAFSA completion continues to be a challenge, but it's really what we need from the state and actually the federal level as well is more education towards parents and the communities. Our advisors are responsible for increasing the college-going culture of their high schools, but they can't do it by themselves. There needs to be more of a community groundswell around college going, and a big part of that is completing the FAFSA. And like many people on this call, I'm first-generation student. I'm from a rural background, and my parents very much didn't want to submit the FAFSA in order for me to go to college, and it took a lot of convincing. We need more normalizing of it and more education towards the parents and the communities of not only what it means to apply for federal financial aid and state aid and institutional aid, but why it's important for your student short and long term. So that's where we really need that. The state, we need the federal agencies, state agencies to really push that and build that. In a similar way, we also need state agencies and organizations to do a better push and incentivizing and supporting institutions to go out and recruit rural students. Jeff talked about this a little bit. Dr. Wyatt, thank you so much for the active recruitment you do of students, but for so many rural communities, especially small town and remote communities, institutions just aren't recruiting there because they can't get there. There's a physical distance. It's not There's not the return on investment, so to speak, for going to these smaller districts. We really need more support because our advisors can't take students to campus. They can't do campus visits the way they do in urban and suburban areas. And so we need better access, recruitment, and admission staff going to the communities, speaking at the high schools, meeting with the teachers, getting to know the communities. And that really, again, is going to come from a higher level than just the institutions who may or may not have it in their budget. So that's something else that would go a long way to improving the college-going culture and getting students like Adam to see themselves on campus. The Emerging Rural Leaders Program at UChicago is an amazing template, an amazing model. I encourage everyone to look at it. But that's a great way to help students see themselves on campus, and I think that's what we really need.
Great, thank you. And that spoke to one of the questions I was going to ask as a follow-up, where Laura Kessel had chatted in just this idea that she herself, as a first-generation college student, if she hadn't made a big push, she didn't have that family at home support to help make sure that she was getting there. So thank you for going ahead and answering one of those Q&A questions as well. Adam, we're going to come back to you. And so you have a lot of leaders here from higher education institutions and from around the state. If you were going to give them a piece of advice as to how they should support rural students and as they're thinking about accessing college, what would it be, and why do you think that would be impactful?
Yeah, I would say focus on awareness, just reading into the strategies that have been accomplished at various summits and organizations. It's clear that effort is being put into addressing access to higher education for rural students. But however, as like a rural high school student, I've been mostly unaware of this amazing work that's been done. One of the main issues at my high school is that at an administrative level, we can forget that we are in a rural community, which can create some sort of blindness to the solutions tailored for my school. Like from this issue, students may feel at a disadvantage, but not understand why we are in this position and what resources there are to solve these problems. So that could lead to a reduced enrollment in post-secondary education. I feel that if students were given a comprehensive understanding of these efforts, they would feel more comfortable enrolling in colleges and universities with those high graduation rates.
Thank you so much, Adam. President Wyatt, we already heard some of the great strategies that you're employing to try to break down barriers for rural students. And I think in particular, the transfer policies that you referenced are a really great example. The question is, what are some tangible levers for breaking down the barriers that we have? And you spoke about some of those. And then also trying to think about from a statewide level, and as we want to scale those and take those to other places, how should state leaders be thinking about that? Oh, I got you on mute.
Like Matt, I'll take a little license and offer two and rather than one. And neither of them will be astounding. The first is financial aid, more and easier to access. That, you know, especially within, well, for all institutions, there is the curse of merit scholarship / discounting. Until we find some fundamental way to change that model, we have to live with it. And having increased financial aid and aid that is easier to access for our students is a fundamental need. Another one that we've touched on in a variety of ways, but it's a much more robust college counseling capacity within our high schools. There are many. I was fortunate as a high school student that I had two very good high school counselors who pointed me toward a high quality residential liberal arts college. It was purely the luck of the draw, and it should not be the luck of the draw.
Great, thank you so much. And President White, if I could, I'm going to come right back to you, just as we did talk about the community college partnerships. What are some of the specific ways that you partner with the community colleges? And I'm just wondering, as this is something that really does seem to have scalability in it, where other universities should be thinking similarly, what are some of the key steps that you think other colleges and universities should be thinking about as well?
Well, there's sort of the first step, and it's an important step of articulation agreements, and there is a statewide process for that as well. So that is very much important. And frankly, it's work, the ability to have that clear articulation agreement is something that we have just recently achieved. Every institution of higher education in America is exactly alike in its effort to be distinctive, and every faculty believes that its curriculum is the alpha and the omega, and they often are. But we needed to be sure, and we removed some and smoothed some obstacles within our curriculum that would create disincentives to a student to move from a 2-year institution, from a community college to a 4-year institution, and curricular impediments that would require them to commit to at least another semester, if not another year, in order to complete an undergraduate education. And that's just simply not, it's not right. It's not tenable in this market. So we've gone, we're certainly achieving those articulation agreements, but as I made a reference to a minute ago, we're working to take that to the next level. And that's to work very closely in partnership with, again, beginning with Carl Sandburg, to treat students who have indicated an interest in completing a 4-year degree, to treat them as our students together, to have a faculty advisor, have our admissions staff continue to work with them, to remain in touch with them during the 2 years at the community college, to be sure that what they are doing is in fact preparing them to move absolutely seamlessly into completing the next 2 years at the college. So that's so it really goes beyond just sort of the normal articulation agreement to really working in very close partnership with the community college.
Great, thank you so much. And we had a question chatted in, and Dr. Newland, I think I'm going to come to you with this one. The question was from Cami Davis, who's a Peace Corps Fellow at Western Illinois University. And it was, are there initiatives to create and support certificate programs in high schools so students can graduate high school with a skill set that allows them to seek employment immediately out, from high school? Or are students dependent on community colleges for this kind of training? And I guess also just wondering, a broader question is, you all think as College Advising Corps about how to support students with certificate programs that are potentially coming straight out of high school and with 2-year colleges? How do you all approach that kind of work as well?
That's a really excellent question. So I'll take the second part. Our advisors, we have a whole school model. So we serve every student in the school, including schools that have a CTE, Career and Technical High School, attached to or associated with the district. And so while sometimes they're physically located on a different campus or maybe a different building and it can be difficult to get them, our advisors serve them as well, because a lot of them may not want to stop at that high school degree or that certificate. They may want to go on to further education. So we're there to serve them. But often, and I've heard this from our advisors around the country, those CTE programs at high school are really strong and really connected in with those industries that students are able to graduate and go right into work. And so our advisors are there to support them and make sure they don't need any additional certifications and or diplomas and things like that. So yes, we're working with those students in almost all of our schools. Often though, that comes down to, it is at the community college level or a sort of hybrid program, a dual enrollment program between the high school and the community college. More high schools and community colleges and employers we're seeing a resurgence of apprenticeships, which I'm very thrilled about. The Job Corps does a terrific training program that's similar to an apprenticeship, but those are kind of seeing a resurgence, which I think is terrific. But often those are very focused on traditional trades. They're not as prevalent in more IT tech focused fields that are going to be kind of the jobs of the future. So to the question, I think a lot of those programs are happening at the community college level. I think there is starting to be a change, but it's just sort of the traditional model we've seen is still the precedent and the standard. But I hope to see that change with more communication and more partnerships between high schools, community colleges, chambers of commerce, workforce development committees.
Great, thank you so much. So Adam, I'm going to come back to you with one more question, and as it relates to the program that you've been supported at with through the University of Chicago, what are some of the longer term supports that they'll offer you as you move on into your college career?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that the sport they've given me is already like within my mind. Like I have a lot more confidence. They've instilled some leadership skills in me. We've worked through some sort of like education on how to be a leader and take ownership of your education. So I think I'll definitely use that in my future. As for resources I can reach out to, I know that they've opened up communication with the admissions counselors for UChicago. So I always have them to reach out to if I ever need to.
Great, super. Thank you so much. President Wyatt, I want to come back to you one last time, I think, as we're running low on time here. As you think about specifically helping students with application to Monmouth and your university, and it really is that kind of that challenging process for students to fully apply to a college or university, and especially as that's compounded now with COVID-19. What is it that you all are doing to help that application process, keep enrollment numbers up, and support students during this time?
Yeah. Just as our faculty did in March, our admissions efforts immediately moved to virtual. And fortunately, we have a very strong college communications and marketing program at Monmouth, and with a strong video capacity. We have an excellent videographer. And so we were able to create engagement through video, through our admissions counseling staff, through our student financial planning staff. We were able to take all of that directly into a virtual realm. And again, knock on wood, we're looking to have a really good, strong, and sizable group of students come to the campus this fall, and we're continuing those practices. And I think we have, our goal was to, as much as possible, achieve the same level of intensity in the engagement with our prospective students as we would have in person. And in fact, I think with the variety of means at hand, it may have been even more intense than it was before. And we'll continue that even as we've just now opened up to prospective students and their families visiting campus with all the appropriate precautions. But we're going to continue to use all of the virtual tools that we were able to deploy over the spring.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Nolan, would you like to provide any context too about how College Advising Corps is pivoting during this time of remote and outside of the building learning?
Yeah, we've done a lot of things to help support our partner programs, and our partner university programs have done a lot of great initiatives themselves. What we're trying to help guide them and what the advisors are trying to do is sort of try many tactics. We saw this, a lot of our advisors were pulled out of schools in March and didn't return for the rest of the year, and the upcoming year we're expecting something similar. So we're encouraging our advisors, our programs, to just get innovative and creative and try different methods of supporting students. So whether that's doing Zoom calls like this, or creating very simple Google websites to get information out, mailing things just by paper mail, as crazy as that is to imagine, sending paper mail versions of things out. We're really encouraging them to get creative and really work with their high school partners, because the high schools, they're embedded, they're a part of the community. They may know what's best for their community and their students to reach students and parents and counselors. So we're encouraging them to try every avenue possible, because we're thinking this is going to be the new normal for at least the short term. And so our advisors are doing everything they can to track down information for students from phone numbers, parent phone numbers, email addresses, everything they can so that they can find out what works best for the different student populations. And then we at the national office, we're there to support them, provide resources, share out what successes they've had. And that's a lot of what we've been doing, especially with our rural advisors, where they have additional challenges like broadband access, geographic challenges with, you know, if you live in Appalachia or something like that. So we're just trying to do as much knowledge sharing as we possibly can so that our advisors can continue to provide the, you know, high quality service that they've always done, even in this new reality we're living in.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We are running low on time, so I do want to just thank all three of you for joining us today. And really everybody that has. I think this is a very rich discussion. I know we had some questions we weren't able to get to. In particular, heard some comments and questions also around financial advising beyond just applying for FAFSA, but what do you do once you get that? How do you evaluate the price tag, et cetera? And additionally, some more cooperation with community colleges. Luckily, we have 2 more webinars, so we're going to get into those topics in even more detail. But again, thank you so much to all 3 of you for joining us. Speaking of upcoming webinars, we hope that when you registered for this one, you saw and registered for the next 2 coming up on Monday, July 27th, where we'll really talk about that digital divide challenge that we have going on currently. And then on Thursday, August 6th, about community partnerships with IHEs and how they can help students succeed. We'll be following up with some key takeaways from this. And I should also thank Dr. Westbrook for having answered a number of questions there. If you look in the Q&A, you'll see some of those as well. So flag that for everybody. We will also be following up with some of you who have some more specific questions. And if you have any other questions, please reach out to the Hunt Institute and we'll be more than happy to do that. Again, thank you to Lieutenant Governor Stratton and Deputy Governor Ruiz for helping put this together, and to everyone who joined us today. We look forward to seeing you on the 27th. Thank you.